hear me all right? All right. I first want to thank Pastor Eric for letting me come up here and speak to all of you today. And I also just want to thank all of you for being people that I feel like I can be a little vulnerable with and talk to you. So thank you. Like Pastor said, I think these readings are something that I've struggled with a while. We have this sort of jealous, angry God that we have to wrestle with and sort of figure out what that means. And I know for me, I've really gotten to, I think, the end of my own faith journey that I can do by myself, right, with sitting with Scripture. And at this point, I really need to be part of a faith community to go any further. And so that's why I wanted to come up here, put myself out and say this, that here's where I am in my own journey with this, and I hope that some of you are, if it resonates with you, then you can come work with me and we can keep moving forward together as a group. So thank you. When I think of this, these building of the golden calf and God getting really angry, right, and especially with the First Commandment of like, thou shalt have no other gods before me, it comes off as jealous, as toxic, as restrictive, right? Yet we start every Sunday with all are welcome, but we have a God saying only me. We got to reconcile that somehow, right? We got to learn, what do we do with that? How do we make that mean something for us? So I want to go over just sort of the different ways I've heard this interpreted and the way that I'm working through it myself. And hopefully that helps resonate with some of you. So, we have seen in recent years people literally building golden statues of, celebrities and politicians, and I think it's very easy to say, that's probably breaking the First Commandment. That's not really something we should be doing as Christians. But I don't think we should be complacent and just say, well, as long as we're not doing that, then we're good. We can move on to the next commandments. We're doing our job. So, what else could this mean besides just not building golden calves and worshiping them? I think the way when I was a kid, this was always explained, right, is like, don't worship money, right? That's sort of an easy one. I think most of us have heard, don't worship wealth and power and fame. Don't center your lives on that, because we've all seen the damage that caused, right? Whether we go back thousands of years, whether it's today in our world, we see the corrupting power that those who worship money and focus themselves and they exploit others to get it, we know that's a bad thing. We know that hurts people. No matter our even political leanings and stuff, I think we can all agree that like the worship of money is the cause of a lot of our problems. And same thing with celebrities, right? We take athletes and politicians and actors and stuff, and we put them up on these pedestals, and we say, well, if we just can be more like them or dress like them and tell them how great they are, right, then maybe we'll get a little bit of that in return, right? Because if you think about that's what worship is all about. When you create an idol, right, those people in the desert, they took their few valuable possessions and just said, well, if we just keep giving, then maybe we'll get something back, right? And I think that's what we accidentally do, whether it's the money or people or even our nation, right? We see that with nationalism here in the United States and around the world, where you can't say anything bad about it, right? It's blasphemy, right? You've created a god out of your own country, and I don't think that's okay either. And I think most people would agree these things those are all sort of breaking this First Commandment. But that's obvious, and for me, anytime the Bible has real meaning and really changes my life, it's when it doesn't match my values already, when it doesn't conform to what I think, when it challenges me, when it's a little more subtle, when it's not so obvious. So that's what I really want to talk about. What are these not obvious things, these things we create idols of, that we start to worship accidentally? And so, I think that's really what's getting in here is this, like, it's not so much don't do these very obvious things, it's be careful not to create gods that will trick you. So, an example I can think of, obviously we've seen what happens when CEOs and billionaires worship money, when they worship themselves and their career. But what about those with really fulfilling important positions, like vocations that make a difference in our communities, right? The social workers, the therapists, our teachers, our first responders, even those of you who are directors or CEOs of small local companies that make a huge difference in the community and help, build that upward social mobility in our communities and our families. Those are really important things. Those are great vocations and great jobs. But how many of you have seen this or felt this yourself when that vocation becomes the center of your life? When you start to worship that, when you start to sacrifice to that, you start to drain yourself, right? You start to hurt yourself, and you start to hurt the very people you set out to help in that vocation because you centered on it sort of too much. You gave too much. You sacrificed too much and lost sight of the people that are actually there. So I think that's one example where we can sort of lose our way that way. For me, something I struggle with is more of an idea, a little more abstract, but like financial stability, right? I want to be financially stable so I can give my money to charity, to the church, to the community. I want to be able to do good things with my resources. But if that stability becomes too much of my identity, and it's something I become too protective of, right? And any threat to it is a blasphemy, then I'm not giving. I'm becoming more miserly. I'm not giving what I could be giving or doing what I could be doing with my time because I have to, I just need a little bit more to be secure. I need to make sure Thea's going to be okay, right? I need to make sure my family's going to be okay. And by doing that, I might be not doing what I could be doing, right? Because it's become too central in my life. I've put it up on a pedestal, right? Up on an altar. And then one that I've seen in many people's lives, and again, these are things that we have good intentions, but I think we can cause harm if we create a false idol of it. And one I would say is our values. So how do you worship your values, right? We have good values. We believe in our values. They're important to us. This is generally, I think a lot of you are in a very progressive church, and so you might say, I'm an ally to the LGBT. I'm anti-racist. I support our immigrants. But if that identity becomes the thing we focus on, that identity becomes the thing we protect, then we become defensive, right? So if someone tells you, that was sort of an anti-queer slur you just said, like in a microaggression, or, you have that idea or that opinion because of the privilege you have from systemic racism. If your first reaction is defensive, if you feel like you need to prove a point and say, I'm not racist, right? I am an ally. And you actually go on the attack sometimes. You might be hurting the very people you say you support and that you want to help. I've seen this, again, people with great intentions that are really trying their best, but you lose sight of the people, right? Because you started worshiping the idea, the idol, instead of the people and helping them. Okay, so those, again, are more these ideas that I think we can create accidentally, but we can also make idols of people. Okay, so we think about, again, what is worship, right? It's like sacrificing and giving to, dedicating yourself, your heart, your mind. To me, that's, as a parent, sounds like my child, right? Like, that's who you can very easily accidentally worship, right? Because they're centered of your life. You're giving to them. But it's got to stay the person, right? That's there, the child themselves, not this idol I've created, right? Not some ideal version of them that I've cast in gold in my mind and in my heart. Because when we do that, how many of you have either had this happen to you from your parents or you as parents or seen it in families around you, where there's this version of a child that you worship and you sacrifice to and you give to, but you lost sight of the real kid and what they really want and their dreams. And they're going to fail sometimes, right? They're going to make mistakes. They're going to change and be different from that statue that you created of them. And if we lose sight of that, if we worship that idol too much, we're going to hurt them, right? We're going to do the exact opposite of what we wanted to. That's the hard thing with these statues too, right? You created it in their shape. So they're going to hide behind it really, really easily. Make sure you always keep sight of that person. I think another one we see a lot of issues in our world, especially with relationships, is our spouse or our partner. Right? If you create, how many marriages have you seen fail because one or both people in it worship the marriage, sacrificed to the marriage, and forgot the person? Right? They gave everything to this idea, the relationship itself, and lost sight of the person they really loved and care about. I think we probably all seen examples of that. And lastly, sort of like with the values, you can accidentally worship yourself. And I don't mean in this like vain way of like, oh, I'm the best, right? I'm God. More in the way of, right, again, sort of like your child. You've created an ideal version of yourself. Like, this is the person I present to the world. And I need to protect that image that they see. And you lose sight of who you really are and what your needs really are. All right, so that's a lot of ideas on what we shouldn't be worshiping, right? How we can accidentally do this. What's the alternative? What is the scripture reading getting to? And this is just, you could probably think of many, many other examples of things we accidentally put up on an altar in our own hearts. So what's the alternative? I think what we're getting at here in these scripture readings and what even in Exodus we see is that it's anything on earth, anything here, all these things, they're all finite, right? They're all going to disappoint at some point. They're all going to change. They're all going to run out, right? We might crush them under our own expectations. And that's just how earth works, right? That's how things are. And we could chalk this up and say, well, that is the Old Testament God. Old Testament God was angry and jealous and toxic and stuff, but it got better, right? So let's look at the New Testament, right? Jesus sort of re-sums it up for us, right? And says, well, love your neighbor as yourself. And we love that, right? That's really easy. That's what we focus on. That's what we want to do. Let's love our neighbor. We talk about it every Sunday. But that wasn't what Jesus said, was it? What did Jesus say when he was told to summarize the Ten Commandments? It was love the Lord your God with all your mind and all your body and all your strength. Then love your neighbor as yourself. Because Jesus knew the truth that you're going to worship something. And if you're worshiping something finite, you're going to eventually not be able to love your neighbor. Because you're going to get drained, you're going to run out. And that's when we start breaking the other commandments, when we don't have anything left. Right? If you look at all the other commandments, that's really what they're about. You're missing something and you're trying to get it. It's because you forgot to keep that first one. So the analogy for me that helps us make the most sense, and what I try to do with it, is the cup, right? We all have our own cup, and we're all pouring it out, right? You give a little to this person and a little bit to this person, and it's slowly going down, but hopefully there's other things refilling it. And I think that's why a lot of us, people will turn to worship accidentally or purposefully to help refill that cup so you can keep giving it out. Now, with this example of the cup, I think in my life, the thing that I probably put in the center and sacrifice to and pour out my cup the most, in that place where God should be, is Nicole. And she does it for me, right? She pours out her cup for me. But we both, if we just keep pouring our cups back and forth, I was a physics major a long time ago, and I studied thermodynamics, and eventually you're losing a little bit with each pour, right? Eventually both our cups are going to be drained. And Thea's going to refill our cups, our family. All of you graciously pour out your cups for us. But overall, we're still all finite. We still have cups that are draining. We're all going to run out eventually. So we need a different source. And I think that's what the scripture reading is really getting at. It's not a prohibition. It's really a liberation. It's not restricting us. It's really an invitation. God's offering us something that we can't get by ourselves, that we can't get here. And so what if instead we refilled our cups from a well, right? From the mother that birthed the universe, right? From a triune God that's been dancing in this three-way perfect harmony of love since before time. From the Logos, right? That poured out all of its divinity, came to earth and pitched a tent, suffered as a human with us. Imagine what you could do with even just a fraction of that cup. For me, that is the hardest part about being Christian, is admitting that that cup is real and accepting it. Because that's the best part. It's been offered freely already. That cup is being offered for us. You don't have to beg. You don't have to do some weird ritual. It's already been offered to you. And so in this stewardship season, right, what we're all planning for, what we're all talking about is how do we pour out our own cups? How do we help our community? How do we pour up our cups for each other, for the church? So during this time, let's not forget, if we want to sustain those good works, let's find a source, let's find a wellspring that won't run out, right, that is infinite. And so my prayer today is that if this is something that sounds, sparking anything for any of you, that you help me remember to keep saying yes to that cup that's being offered and living a life knowing I have that cup, and I will commit to continuing doing the same thing for you. So God bless you all. I love you all. Thank you.